heard Black Hat, sir. What about Ringworm?
That gangly pest is being delivered as we speak.
Oh, not again.
Man, I love Cartoon Network. It's always been my favorite out of the big three. With Nickelodeon, I had to bob and weave through Rocket Power and Wild Thornberry to get to the good stuff, and Disney Channel had too many live action shows in between the cartoons for my liking. I am not wasting my Saturday watching Life with Derek. If I want to watch thinly veiled incest, I can just wait for a Folgers commercial.
What are you doing?
You're my present this year.
But Cartoon Network was my ride or die. There were still clunkers here and there for sure, but the good far outweighed the bad, and CN thoroughly dug itself into my heart. So when I got a bit older, I would look up stuff about it online, going through old bumpers and clips of shows. There was nothing that could beat watching the Big Picture show in like 20 parts on YouTube back in the day. But eventually, I started coming across stuff I had never seen before. Weird bumpers that I didn't remember, coming up soon signs for shows that definitely didn't belong there, and entire shows that seemed to appear out of thin air. This is when I realized that this was still Cartoon Network. It just wasn't my Cartoon Network. These were different Cartoon Networks from across the world. I had never really thought too much about Cartoon Network in other countries. I just kinda thought it would be the same as the one in America, but like spoken in whatever language they speak there. I mean, there can't be that many languages. Oh, okay, we need to start downsizing. Do we really need all these? Like, how many people actually speak French?
Hello.
Bonjour.
Crazy gibberish.
But instead of just having the same identical channel in every country, it's more like how they do McDonald's around the world, where every country has an entirely different menu and flavors to offer, and I'm in the mood to do some sampling. So get out that passport you forged after the incident, because we're taking a trip. We are going to check out a bunch of different shows from all over the place, from the west to the east, and all those crazy spots in between.
Huh. Guess we're in a town called Springfield.
Springfield, eh? What state?
I can't imagine we're allowed to say.
Shows that you can usually only find if you actually live in the place they're played, but I have my ways.
I love stealing. I love taking things.
I'm your host, in Geneva Convention violation, D'Angelo Edwards, and today I'm taking my hat off to International Cartoon Network.
It goes ba-bum, ba-bum, bum, click, bum, ba-bum, ba-bum, bum, click, bum.
We need more bad guys to smash.
Bum, click, bum. I be Lord of the Rings, I manifest. Represent from the den, I don't wear no vest. I got a heart in my chest, it goes ba-bum, ba-bum. I sway halfway, the day's hump, get over. I be Lord of the Rings, I manifest.
I'll put a shot to your
sister. I don't wear no vest. I got a heart in my chest, it goes ba-bum, ba-bum. I sway halfway, the day's hump, get over. One out the ring, so now you got.
And so, the time has come for the valiant Prince Ivandoe to embark on his heroic quest to... No, go!
Please, Nanny, not now.
Alright, let's start things off slow and visit the land of those nerds we beat up a few hundred years ago.
Wanker! Wanker!
I know.
Coming out hot from Cartoon Network UK, we have the heroic quest of the valiant Prince Ivandoe. Man, that's a bigger mouthful than Big Ben, and I don't mean the clock.
Oh, behave.
Starting off as a series of shorts back in 2017, this show follows the titular Prince Ivandoe as he goes off on the quest to find the magical golden feather. He's accompanied by his ever-faithful squire, Bert, and together, the two of them brave the mysteries of the forest as they venture forth into legend. Too bad they suck at it though. Yeah, despite the level of bravado that he always shows, Ivandoe is not really cut out to be an adventurer, but that doesn't stop him from trying, and we get to see his misadventures as he tries to prove to the world that he is a hero. If the art style looks familiar to you, that's because it was produced by the same studio that made The Amazing World of Gumball, Cartoon Network Studios Europe, now known as Hanna-Barbera Studios Europe. While the shorts leaned more into that mixed media style that Gumball is known for, with cartoon characters set up against realistic backgrounds, the show is completely hand-drawn, and it's kind of gorgeous. The backgrounds have been lovingly rendered, and it really helps add to the epic feeling of being on a quest. The character designs also have a lot of appeal, with lots of different variations in body sizes and creatures. I still really like the look of the shorts as well though. They actually built miniature sets for everything. That is dedication. I don't think they even do that for Gumball. Even if you don't find the actual show to be to your liking, you can't deny that they killed it in the visual department. As for the rest of it, I actually think it's pretty good. I was worried that Ivandoe would be too annoying to find likable. He does complain a lot, and he often pouts when he doesn't get his way. But I think that they still make him just likable enough to where you still want to root for him.
Now what are you doing? I will not be babied! I'm a big boy! And
While he does think highly of himself, he possesses a code of chivalry, and even if he wants to make sure he looks good doing it, he never hesitates to help people, as long as it's not during lunchtime. I think the show mostly works because it never hesitates to humble Ivandoe whenever he gets a little too big for his britches. The creators said they like it when characters are less than perfect because it makes them easier to relate to, and as the series went on, I really grew to like the guy. I especially liked the friendship between him and Bert. I was worried the whole show would just be Ivandoe taking advantage of his good nature, and sometimes he does, but a lot of the time he's always thanking Bert for everything he does for him. It's really sweet. There's a few other fun characters too, like Jezebel, a thief that goes on to become the prince's love interest, and Prince Fawn, a stuck-up swan who is basically the character I was afraid Ivandoe was going to be. There was a lot of anti-swan rhetoric going around the whole series, and at first I was like, is this bird racism? But no, swans just kinda suck in this world. Like, literally all of them. But yeah, I think the show is pretty good. It looks great, the adventures they go on are varied and interesting, and the characters really grow on you. To be honest, with how much of a barren wasteland Cartoon Network is over here, I'm surprised it's not airing right now. Gumball has a pretty big fan base, and I think people would take to this just as well. It's already in English too, so there wouldn't be any work to do. Maybe they're just waiting to do it, but they could at least drop the episodes on Max or something. I don't know. You can check out the shorts on the UK YouTube page for Cartoon Network, and the first official episode is up on YouTube as well. So go give it a try if you're up for a little adventure, romance, and lots of posing.
come, Bertie! It's time we got our map back!
Oh, there you are! Hello!
If adventure isn't your thing, then maybe something on the spookier side will pique your interest. Frankelda's Book of Spooks is something that I wish we got a lot more of. A stop-motion horror anthology series. I grew up on stuff like Goosebumps, Coraline, and Nightmare Before Christmas, and this show scratches that same itch. Should probably get some cream for that though. Coming from Latin America, this show was originally envisioned as a small little web series, with its pilot only being 4 minutes long and dropped on YouTube. But seeing how at the time HBO Max had plans to help develop 100 different projects in Latin America, this show was expanded from its humble roots into a 5-episode long miniseries with a pretty hefty budget, vastly increasing the scale of it. And man, I am glad that it grew because this show is so cool. The main focus of it is Frankelda, a ghost trapped inside of a living haunted house. She's joined by Hernival, her grumpy talking book companion and lover, I guess?
I'm not only a book, but I'm an ugly one.
What are you talking about? I think you're a pretty book.
Man, talk about curling up with a good book. Side note, did you guys ever notice he puts his tongue down her throat? Crazy movie. 10 stars, scarred me for life. But back to the show, we listen to Frankelda as she tells us spooky tales, mostly focused on kids getting into supernatural situations.
Hey, you dropped your boat. Here you go.
Come on! Abduct me!
No!
from dealing with witches to more cultural monsters like the Coco, which is basically the Hispanic equivalent of the boogeyman. The stories themselves are kind of basic, but the excellent presentation and atmosphere more than make up for it. While for the most part, I wouldn't call it that scary, except for one episode, but we'll get to that. Every episode is a super fun time because of the mood and setting, and it can get surprisingly dark. Like, not one of these stories finish with a happy ending. In fact, most of these end pretty messed up. Like, there's an episode where a kid is too embarrassed to go swimming with his friends because he's a little chubby. As it goes on, the kids are lured into a lake where a siren monster resides. It hypnotizes the kids and makes it do its bidding, but the chubby kid musters up his courage and uses his shirt to block the creature's eyes, saving the kids. At least that's what it seems like at first. However, in reality, the siren hypnotizes him as well, and all the kids are left enslaved by it, where they will presumably drown eventually. All the episodes end like this, and it's pretty messed up, so of course I love it. My favorite episode, though, is one about a girl who's embarrassed by her passion for playing the theremin. Kids keep teasing her and making her feel ashamed, so she makes a deal with the Coco to remove her passion for music. And the visuals for this scene are super creepy. Just look at some of the faces on the passion spirits, like that's actually scary. And speaking of music, something that surprised me about this show is that it actually has a musical number every episode, and all the songs are great.
Listen to me, darling.
No nacimos siendo quien queremos, no hay problema, eso cambiará. Tal vez no eres quien tú deseas, con cierta receta se arreglará.
I'd love it if they would release a full album one day. While the show did get an official English dub, the songs themselves remain in Spanish, and I think they're better for it. This show really is a breath of fresh air. Children's horror is a genre that has been super neglected lately, which is a shame because without these gateway shows, I would never have discovered that horror is one of my favorite genres as a kid. But Frankelda is a welcome addition to the list. Besides the stories that the show tells, there's also a little background plot going on as well. As the show goes on, you learn that Frankelda and Hernival are trying desperately to escape the haunted house, and the last episode focuses on their backstory. We learned that Frankelda used to be known as Francisca Imelda, a young girl that was obsessed with horror, and as she grew up, she tried to become a horror writer, but was turned away because no one thought a girl could write horror. She did have one fan though, Hernival, the prince of the Monster Kingdom. They fall in love and he takes her away to become his kingdom's new official nightmare writer. But the previous nightmare writer, Procustus, grows jealous and curses them, separating Francisca from her body and turning Hernival into a book. It turns out that the haunted house is actually him, and now they need to awaken him so they can make their escape. The way the story built up really kept me interested, and the first season ends on a cliffhanger, so I hope it gets another. This show is simply bursting with potential. From introducing people to cool new mythology, to just getting more cool stop-motion animation. One of my favorite aspects of the show is that during the credits, they show off all the concept art and footage of the animators working on everything. It's really cool to watch everything come together. It has a dub, so maybe it'll come to the States eventually, but I'll be happy as long as I can get some more. I just hope I don't have to wait too long before Frankelda tells me another story. If you want to explore the world of international cartoons, and you don't feel like reading subtitles all day, or maybe you're at a sacrifices to the dubbing gods, then today's sponsor is for you. Babbel is a language learning app that teaches you how to speak, read, and listen in new languages. Babbel can help prepare you for real-world conversations, and if normal lessons aren't your thing, then you can also learn with games, podcasts, and videos. They even have live classes taught by top teachers with their Babbel Live program. Go beyond just memorizing vocab words and actually understand what you're learning, with lessons created by experts in the field. Trust me, those random phrases you picked up from cartoons aren't gonna cut it in the real world.
¿Tienes bio?
I wanted to brush up on my Spanish, and with Babbel, all it takes is 10 minutes a day to start having conversations in as little as 3 weeks. And while you're learning the language, you can also pick up some cool facts about the country's culture. If you want to stop living that lame monolingual lifestyle, then you can get Babbel today. And when you click my link below, you'll get 60% off. So what are you waiting for?
Mais je parle français maintenant! Incroyable!
Once again, you can click the link below for 60% off Babbel and get started on your language journey today.
Damn? Nope. Damn? Just a lookalike. Not even.
I ain't afraid of no ghosts.
No way. Just terrible playing. Double the trouble.
Huh? Hey, nerd!
Since we're already in Latin America, let's stick around as we look at the next one, a show that I'm pretty sure a lot of you are familiar with already, since when it was announced, I saw a ton of people get excited for it. Yep, next up is Villainous. I remember when this was announced, Tumblr blew up. And I mean, of course they did, just look at it. 2 sexy men, a raw XD girl, and a mascot that was just begging to be turned into a marketable plushie. Add to the fact that it was using a more angular art style in the age of roundness, and you had people absolutely throbbing at the idea of it. It started as a series of web shorts on thatplacetohangout.com, where the creator, Alan Aturo, basically did everything himself, from the animation to voicing every character. This eventually caught the attention of Cartoon Network, who turned it into a series of shorts, then a pilot, until in 2021, it finally became a full series. The show follows Black Hat, a legendary supervillain who has decided to retire and instead offer his services to other villains. Well, I say it follows him, but really he's barely in it. The show really follows his band of lackeys: Dr. Flug, Black Hat's right-hand man and mad scientist; Dementia, the insane muscle of the group and obsessive Black Hat fan; and 505, an experiment of Dr. Flug that doesn't have an evil bone in his body. We follow them as they go up against superheroes from around the world, as they spread Black Hat's name and turn the worlds to villains' favor. I wasn't sure about this one going in, to be honest. I thought it would be just kind of okay, and I don't know why. Maybe it's just because people were getting my hopes up too high. Like, even before this thing came out, people were acting like it was gonna save Cartoon Network, but after watching it for myself, I think I might have been a little too hard on it. It's nowhere near the best thing ever, but for what it is, it's a fun little concept pulled off decently well.
You've done a good, no, a great, no, a good job.
I think the characters have a super fun dynamic, like they actually fight with each other, violently. Like, it's cool that so many cartoons are about friends getting along, having good times together, but wouldn't Owl House be so much better if Luce just like slugged Gus every once in a while? That's the kind of cartoons I was raised on and I turned out fine. The characters are interesting too, like Dr. Flug works for one of the most powerful villains out there. You can see how that is both an honor and terrifying at the same time. So the dude is just usually a pile of nerves, because he knows that if he makes one wrong move, he's probably going to be disintegrated, or worse. And you have to add on the stress of keeping Dementia in line, who really doesn't respect him at all. She's a bit more one note than Flug, either causing chaos or fawning over Black Hat. I used to think her design was a bit too busy, but I do love how when she crouches down, she looks like a lizard, with her hair making the tongue. It's a really cool design touch. 505 is definitely kind of just there though. He doesn't really add or subtract from the show. I don't mind him, but I wouldn't miss him if he was gone. The most interesting fact about him is that he's voiced by Markiplier, which was actually requested by the creator. But all in all, it's really cool seeing a show based around following villains around. It kind of reminds me of Evil Con Carne, which the show itself even recognizes.
On to the next. Case number 2017. The Black Hat Organization against Mr. Evil Con Carne.
Speaking of, this show loves to reference other Cartoon Network shows. You'll just be watching it when bam, there's Johnny Bravo, or hey look, it's Frankie from Foster's.
I understood that reference.
They never add anything to the plot, but it's a cute little touch that's cool to see every now and then. And if you ever wanted to see Eris from Billy and Mandy eating elote, well congrats, you just got your very specific wish. The plots are pretty fun too, protecting a group of ghosts from an overzealous hero trying to demolish their haunted house, participating in a luchador fight, or even going up against a super buff clone of Black Hat. No matter the episode, there's bound to be something interesting happening, but I do have a few gripes about it. Like, for one thing, the sound mixing can be a little rough. The animation looks nice enough, though sometimes it does lean heavily into that floaty Flash territory, but a lot of movements just lack sound effects, which makes everything feel floaty. Like, how are you gonna have a fight scene with barely any punch sounds? I thought that maybe this was a dub problem, but nope, the same problems with the original Spanish version. The more cartoons I watch, the more I realize that no matter how rudimentary your animation is, you have got to have good sound design. Otherwise, the whole thing falls apart. They also put this weird effect on Black Hat's voice that makes it a little grating. Like, I feel like it would be fine without it, or maybe just like a different effect. That might just be a me thing though, might not bother you. Also, I think the trio wins a bit too often. Like, of course they have setbacks and everything, but they usually end up on top. If the villains are too competent, you start to wonder how there are even still heroes around. Just something to think about. But overall, I think Villainous is a fun time. They even tease a deeper plot in the last episode, and I'm excited to see where they're gonna take it. I'm not sure if it's been greenlit for a second season yet, but they recently made it available to watch in the States, so I feel like they have more plans for it. They even had sort of a backdoor pilot episode in the form of a crossover with Victor and Valentino. Whatever they do with the show though, I don't think we've seen the last of Black Hat just yet, and I'm excited to see what acts of villainy they're cooking up next.
You take me for a fool!
So, what's the plan, Doc?
Run.
Alright, before we get to the last show, let's go over a few bite-sized treats for people who might not have the time to get into a full series. Though I can't possibly think how an adult doesn't have free time to watch cartoons. First up, from Cartoon Network India, we have Lampoot, an extremely charming little cartoon about two scientists trying to capture an orange shapeshifter. We follow Lampoot as he evades his pursuers, usually by transforming into different things. This thing is super pretty. The animation is smooth, and it really captures the feeling of those shorter UPA cartoons. And they're so tiny they would be perfect to put in between other cartoons. You know, like how we used to do it, before we entered this late stage capitalist hellscape. Give these a watch for some classic cartoon shenanigans. Next up is Santo vs. the Clones. This is a series of 5 3-minute shorts starring El Santo, the famous luchador who's basically God over in Mexico. Now, you can't go to an animation school without picking up a thing or two about wrestling, so I was excited to go into this one, especially since one of my professors got me into El Santo. This one's for you, dude. I'd say your name, but I don't want to dox ya. This thing is paced at light speed, but man is it a ride. El Santo was always known for his crazy, larger-than-life movies, and this fits right in. We follow the wrestler as he fights against a crazy mad scientist, who's cloning tons of baddies to fight against El Santo. While the animation is a bit janky, it has a real Saturday morning charm that I love. The art style really appeals to me too. Thick outlines can never go wrong. Overall, just some good old-fashioned fun. You can actually watch the whole thing with subtitles over on the creator's Vimeo. Lastly, here's one I've mentioned before, but I might as well talk about it again. Annie Malou was created to be the first animated YouTuber, and this was back in 2015, so this is before VTubers took over the website and my soul. Just one more super chat, I just want to see Ina smile. Anyway, the channel got super popular, and Cartoon Network took notice of it, giving Annie Malou her very own show. It kind of plays out like a mix of the 2 generations of Fridays on Cartoon Network, with Annie Malou interviewing different cartoon characters from all over the channel. It's such a cool concept, even outside of the fact that I also really like how it looks. Really smooth looking rigs. And who wouldn't want to watch a waifu talk to Ben 10? We definitely need our own show like this. Maybe make something like this for every Cartoon Network, with a different host in every country. I think that would be cool. The show was popular enough for Annie Malou to get another show, but this one mostly focused on original characters, which was a little disappointing. Like when they took the Final Fantasy characters out of Kingdom Hearts. parts. It still looks nice though, but that's enough of these small bites. It's time for a real mouthful. And no, I'm not gonna rephrase that.
Girls, please don't just stand there eating ice cream.
I don't think there could be a show that best represents Cartoon Network in other countries than an actual cartoon that was reimagined for overseas. And the one and only time this was ever done was none other than Powerpuff Girls Z. This show has always fascinated me. As someone who has loved both cartoons and anime their entire life, this show always seemed like something that shouldn't exist, but made perfect sense. There was always something distinctly anime about the Powerpuff Girls. From the way the action was boarded, to some of the designs and situations they would get into, you could tell the people who worked on it were fans of anime. Trust me, a weeb can always recognize their own. And I remember when I first saw a picture of this, I thought it was fan art, but then it turned out to be a very real show. A real show that I could not watch, because they never aired it in the States. And I wasn't tech savvy enough at the time to go looking for it on the internet. Back then, I thought just looking at a shady link would be enough to give your computer a virus. But now that I'm brave enough to finally sail the 7 seas, I finally gave it a try. Now I've heard everything about this show, from people calling it a load of garbage to some even saying it's better than the original. So let's get into it. Powerpuff Girls Z is not a one-to-one adaptation of the Powerpuff Girls. They aren't even sisters in this one. The show gives them an entirely different origin. Instead of being created by Professor Utonium, he's instead researching Chemical X with his son Ken. Yep, this professor had a kid the old-fashioned way. I knew he had it in him, and you know his wife had it in her. While taking a break, he drops a bun into a vat of Chemical X, which transforms it into Chemical Z, and then Ken gets a little overexcited and messes with it, causing Z-rays to shoot out, both white and black. The black Z-rays shoot at a monkey, turning him into Mojo Jojo, but the white Z-rays each hit a different girl, giving each of them superpowers and transforming them into the Powerpuff Girls Z. In this version of the show, the team is made up of Momoko, Miyako, and Kaoru, but their superhero names are Hyper Blossom, Rolling Bubbles, and Powered Buttercup. Though I watched the dub, so they just went by the normal Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup names. There are a couple more changes here and there, but those are the big ones to the story. As for changes to the characters, that's when it gets kind of weird. For Blossom and Bubbles, it kind of feels like they mixed both of their personalities together and then split the difference between them. Like they're both kind of ditzy. Blossom is obsessed with candy, Bubbles spends most of her time on fashion. I got used to it over time, but it was a bit jarring at first. Buttercup remains mostly the same, being the tomboy of the group, but it is funny just how much he hates Bubbles and Blossom at the start.
It's not that I don't want to be a superhero, it's just that... Ugh. It's this acting all prissy and girly and stuff. I can't save New Townsville while I'm wearing a skirt, especially not with these two. Ugh, just look at them.
All of the other characters, though, are just kind of neutered versions of themselves. Not as funny or memorable, but to be honest, you could say that about the entire show. Powerpuff Girls Z isn't a bad show per se. In fact, there's a lot I really like about it. Like, I love how it looks. The character designs are nice and dynamic, with bold outlines and great expressions. While I'm a bit lukewarm on some of the redesigns, I think the girls themselves look great, though I kind of prefer some of the other concepts concept designs, especially this one. I still think this is a pretty good translation though into a more magical girl style outfit. Princess Morbucks looks great, Mojo Jojo is a fun take, it's just a really fun show to look at. A lot of the character designs were done by Miho Shimogasa, who worked on other shows like Sailor Moon and Cutie Honey Flash, so it makes sense that the characters look so good. The backgrounds are really nice too. Everything is really organic and stylized. It really stands out among other anime. Kinda gives me a panty and stocking vibe. The animation itself was done by Toei, so it's just as inconsistent as you'd expect, ranging from pretty good to barely moving, but overall, I'd say it's fine. I really do think that I would have loved this as a kid, but looking at it now, there are just some really weird choices they made, like making their powers get activated by Peach, or Poochie as he's known in dub. I thought he died on his way back to his home planet, but whatever. They also each have a main weapon now, with Blossom having a yo-yo, Bubbles has a bubble wand, and Buttercup has a hammer. Pretty sure this was just done to make sure they'd have more merch to sell. Makes sense though. Powerpuff Girls is basically a blank check when it comes to licensed products. But even outside of all these superfluous changes, the main thing that holds Powerpuff Girls Z back is that it's just kind of generic. It's a fine enough show, but it just doesn't hold a candle to the original. The characters aren't as strong, the writing isn't as polished, and overall it just loses that spark. But even if its quality doesn't quite stack up, I do think it's really cool as a novelty. It's always interesting to see characters reinterpreted for different audiences, and I think that if nothing else, Powerpuff Girls Z is a fun experiment. There's a rumor that goes around saying that Craig McCracken hated it, but to be honest, he gave the entire project his blessing. While he didn't have any real influence over the show, he was at least there for the conception of it, and he really enjoyed the experience. There's a lot more that could be said about it, but this isn't meant to be a full review of the show, just kind of a first impressions. While it can come off as kind of generic, the art style adds enough charm that it kept me watching, and I think it's a really cool fusion of Eastern and Western sensibilities, and it kinda bridges that gap between American cartoons and Japanese anime. Not a perfect show, but definitely a fun little what if.
What is the common message that resonates with these diverse audiences? And I wonder if you've thought about that, Craig McCracken.
At the heart of these characters, despite of how broad they are, the exceptional things they can do, they're human beings and they deal with the same kind of problems that other human beings do. And I think that's why you can cross cultures and different countries can appeal. The same fundamental foundation of the characters appeal to everybody because people are people everywhere.
And with that, I think I'm going to end our little world tour. I hope you enjoyed looking at these shows as much as I did. It's always super cool to see how animation gets down outside of America, and not just like stuff like anime, but all over the place. And seeing all these different types of animation filtered through a Cartoon Network lens is especially cool. All these different channels always felt like they had their own in-house style. Like a show from Nick feels like it's from Nick, and a show from Cartoon Network really feels like Cartoon Network. But it's cool to see what that means in a different country, and even if you can't get down with every cartoon you come across, there's still something you can appreciate in every single one. Even outside of the shows, all the different bumpers and presentation styles are cool to see too. Where else can you see Ed willingly kiss a canker, or Velma bust it down? I'm sure you guys have shows from International Cartoon Network that you also love, so leave them in the comments and I'll give them a look. I'm always on the hunt for cool new shows to watch. So if you find yourself starving for a brand new taste, maybe you should put down the burger and fries and go looking in a more exotic place.